Alexander Hamilton had an amazing life. Born penniless on the small island of Nevis, he soon became the authority of American banking. The menu I'm preparing today reflects the opulence of 18th century Philadelphia and dishes that would have been served in the city tavern where Alexander Hamilton was a frequent visitor. Dishes such as corn and oyster chowder, cornmeal fried soft-shell crab, veal breast cooked with turnips, and the most spectacular dessert of the time, Financier. All for Alexander Hamilton and a taste of history. The menu I'm preparing in honor of Alexander Hamilton is rather complex. And to get started, I'm going to start on the main course first, which is a veal breast that gets cooked and later gets finished with turnips and potato. Quite an extraordinary dish. So let's get started. The veal breast is right in front of me. Cut a piece off like that. And then I got a couple of the bones I'm chopping down like so. Okay, go right in the water behind me. So now I'm just taking the boneless breast, cutting in strips like so. The reason you want to use the breast, because it has so much fat, gives the best flavor. Now I'm going to cut it across, big chunks. Put some bay leaves, some cloves. That goes later in the water where the bones are in already. Now I'm going to put this in a bowl here. Put some salt in it too, while I'm already here. Now get it back to the fire. And leek, just the white part. Next I'm gonna do celeriac, which is the root of the celery. Chop a quick onion down and let it simmer away. Now I'm going to start, my opinion, the most spectacular soup that I've actually known, which is corn and oyster as a chowder. All you want to do is take fresh corn and just shuck it off. It's simple. Here we go. So bacon I already chopped earlier. Now we're going to chop some onions quick. So now I'm ready to start the chowder. First thing I do is render the bacon. You render the bacon down. This gives you the amount of grease that you need. Then you sweat the garlic and the onion. Same thing now with the onion. Finely chopped, how nice they are. Now comes the corn. Ready? Fresh corn, beautiful. And the reason you want to sweat it down now is that you get the sweetness from the corn. The sugar releases it slowly. Ready? I'm going to put a stock into it. Chicken stock, any stock will work. I like the flavor of chicken together with the corn and the oysters. Makes a nice combination. Cream. Good amount of cream. I love cream. So now we're going to bring this to a boil. We're going to tie it up with beurre manier. We put the oysters in, and then we can serve up the soup. Hamilton's achievement was earned through hard work, not through inheritance. Let's find out how his talent got discovered.
Alexander Hamilton was one of the most pivotal figures in American history and the chief architect of many of the institutions that comprise our federal government today. Born in the Caribbean island of Nevis, Hamilton struggled through most of his young life. Orphaned before he was a teenager, his perseverance afforded him work at an import-export firm, where he learned the value of trading and commerce at a very young age.
He was dealing with ship captains from all over the world. He was dealing with all types of currencies, exchange rates, types of goods. He said later in his life that that was the most useful education that he ever had.
Hamilton would prove exemplary in his reading and writing skills, inspiring his community to fund his journey to the American colonies in pursuit of a formal education.
Alexander Hamilton was not part of the upper class. He was a bastard child from the Caribbean. The only way you could elevate your status in life outside of being married into the gentleman class was through war.
When the Revolution broke out, Hamilton was quick to put his education on hold and joined the local militia in New York. During the war, Hamilton served as a captain in the New York Artillery Company, ultimately becoming General George Washington's aide-de-camp and most trusted ally.
Washington said, "I'm too busy to do all this paperwork. I can't dictate it to everybody. Please, I need to find someone who can think for me as well." That's a quote. And Hamilton fulfilled that role. And then after a while, Washington allowed Hamilton to write under his signature.
Following the war, Hamilton returned to New York and began a career as a lawyer, ironically defending British loyalists.
He took on over 60 cases trying to protect loyalists and their property, even though that was extremely unpopular.
Alexander Hamilton created judicial review. Hamilton said, wait, Treaty of Paris says we will not penalize people for doing things during wartime. Alexander Hamilton convinced the state of New York judges to overturn the legislature to treat them respectfully.
Hamilton then went on to serve as a member of the Continental Congress and represented New York at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. One of his main focuses was to replace the imperfect Articles of Confederation and support a strong, centralized federal government in the new Constitution.
Anti-Federalists did not want to give up their state's powers to a foreign entity that we just got rid of, such as the British government.
Anti-Federalists like Thomas Jefferson were concerned that a strong central government would potentially grow to be too large, powerful, and possibly corrupt.
Your regulation places a disproportionate amount of influence into the hands of a secret few who themselves are not regulated by the voice of the American people.
If we do as you say, we would be a people governed miraculously without government.
In order to garner the support necessary to ratify the newly written Constitution, Hamilton spearheaded what would become known as the Federalist Papers. Written with the help of James Madison and John Jay, this collection of 85 essays championed the virtues of the Constitution.
There had to be something to appeal and to convince very articulately the value of the Constitution and what was weak about the Articles of Confederation. So it played a critical role in the ratification.
The Federalist Papers, throughout the past 2 centuries, serves as the premier interpretation of the Constitution, and you see more and more the Supreme Court citing the Federalist Papers in order to make rulings.
Now I'm going to show you another 18th century really big tradition during May and June soft shell season. To show you that, I have Chef Bill here, my chef de cuisine from City Tavern, that's going to show you how to clean them, how to bread them without getting your hands dirty. Bill, it's always a pleasure. Show me.
One of my most exciting times of the year is soft shell season. Soft shells are the same as a hard shell crab, except for what they're doing is they're molting. So they shed their shell and then they come out as a soft shell, and then that eventually hardens. There's a couple things that we have to do that's a little different than preparation for a hard shell crab. We have to remove the face, all right? Because up here, you have your teeth, your bones, and you have your eyes, and nobody really wants to eat any of that. So what we do is we'll just take a little bit off right here. Then what I do is underneath, it's called an apron. So we have to remove this. And then the next important thing, one of the most important things, is we have to remove what's called the dead man or the lungs. So what I'll do is I'll just creep up one side. It's a little fibrous and chalky and something you don't want to eat. We want to remove this, just like that. Very simple. And then there's one more important thing. There's their air bladder or their swim bladder is in there, so you want to squeeze it and pop it. Otherwise, if you were to fry it,
Pops right up.
it's gonna pop right in your face. So that's pretty much it.
So just imagine May, June, Philadelphia, 18th century, right on the waterfront. Man, those people go bananas over those things.
Yeah.
Even today, it's still a really big happening when soft shells are in season. Everything is looking good on the heart. Let's get the materials ready for the breading.
So chef, what we have here for this recipe is I have seasoned flour, just salt and a little white pepper because I'm all about the flavor of the crab. I don't want anything to overshadow the flavor of the crab. All right, so I'm gonna start with my wet hand. And I'm going to put this into the dry. So what I do is I'll dust it first to keep my hand dry. And then I'll flip it over. And then I'll put it into an egg wash. Now I'll use my wet hand again. Once again with my dry hand. Make sure you put a little pressure on, not too much, just to make sure it sticks. And then down. And then I'll repeat.
All right, we're ready to fry them.
All right, so now I want to drop the crabs into our hot oil. And it's very important when doing so, you drop away from you. So if it's going to splash, it's going to splash away from you and not on you. They're not going to take very long.
Once the cornmeal is golden, they're done. Here you go. So let's plate them up. I'm ready to try those.
So am I. This dish needs a little bit of dressing up just to show its magnificence.
And voila, thank you. So now I gotta taste it, man. I'm waiting.
I've been dying to try this, chef.
I have to admit, I've never, ever had it with cornmeal.
Wow. That's sweet. And that's what I love about the soft shell, is you get all the flavor.
Look at that.
No waste.
No, beautiful. Bill, great job.
Thank you, chef.
Fantastic.
Thank you for the crab.
Oh, from now on, cornmeal breaded every time.
We have it.
Oh man, beautiful.
I'm sold.
The veal stew I started early this morning because it takes time, because you want to cook it very gentle. Veal breast takes a lot of love. So now I'm turning some turnips. There is no flavor advantage, it's just beautiful. So it's a nice way, you know, food comes from the heart, presented with love, this is love. So what you do is you take a turnip, if you want to ever do that at home, and you cut it into like equal wedges like so. And you take your paring knife and you start turning it. So you take the edges off. Obviously don't discard the turnip, it comes into a beautiful soup, and you add it right in there. Now I'm gonna add this into the existing veal stew that's still simmering away behind, because I'm gonna concentrate now on finishing the soup. The veal has poached gorgeously. Now I'm gonna add in the vegetable. Stir it up. Bring it closer to the fire. And let it simmer away for a few more minutes. So the soup is going to come over to the landing, because I'm going to add in Birthplace. Birthplace is half butter, half all-purpose flour. You add into the hot stock, you whisk it. And obviously you would do this before you put the oysters in it, because you don't want the oysters to disintegrate in there. It's going to go back on the fire just for a little bit, so that the flour gets the heat so it can thicken up. Now oysters was popular in the 18th century as they are today. People say the streets of Philadelphia are paved with oyster shells, and I believe that. Because down at my restaurant, City Tavern, when they did excavation, the oyster shells are still visible. You do not want to overcook the oysters. And you know, oysters are eaten raw, obviously also fried, but most people like the oysters raw, so you can never undercook that, because anybody who likes oysters would like them with a little moisture to it. I want to show you quick how my oysters have curled. You see it? Just slightly. Okay. Ready? Look at that. Doesn't need no explanation. Okay, parsley on top. This is all she wrote. My corn and oyster chowder is ready. One of a kind, a spectacular dish. Put it right here. All right. Now comes the finale, which is one of my favorite dishes. The reason for it is veal breast is not really common, but it's so much flavor. It's also expensive, was expensive, still expensive, but it's a unique feast. So I'm gonna bring my veal breast over there. That's slowly simmered the entire time. Look at that. That is beauty. You guys gonna be in for a treat. Man, let me take a little piece out here. Oh. No words, can't explain it. Unbelievable. All the goodness cooked in here, from the veal breast, the veal bones. You see the bones are completely clean now. It means when you cook it slowly, the meat will literally fall off the bone. So now I'm gonna get the base of the stew, go right over to my fire, ladle in here, and this goes on top. My base, which is onion, potato, and turnip. All this gets some nice amount of parsley and the veal. Oh gosh. Alexander Hamilton, you would have been so proud to be here today with me. I have a luxury today to using a Kerr de Boeuf, which is an heirloom tomato. Parsley on top. And this is brick, the tarragon up. My Mendes Thomas Scheffler's favorite herb. Look at that, what a feast. Let me recap what we did. We have obviously our fantastic oyster and corn chowder, soft shell crab, you saw us making cornmeal fried, and obviously the pièce de résistance, our veal stew. This meal is far from being completed. We're going to end up with a spectacular dessert called Financier, which is in keeping with the reputation of Alexander Hamilton.
Appointed as the first United States Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton worked to implement policies that he believed would revitalize the debt-ridden nation and sustain economic growth.
We were losing respect, we had poor credit, we were essentially bankrupt. We had nothing except lots of debt, and we had to find a way to attract investment capital.
Alexander Hamilton knew that it was so critical for the credit of the country to make sure that the debts were paid off in full on time, so that it was a signal to other countries and the wealthy in the US, you can invest.
In order to accomplish these goals, Hamilton proposed the First National Bank of the United States, despite opposition from his political adversary, Thomas Jefferson.
Regulating commerce and directing a bank are two very different things. Your bank may be convenient, but it is not necessary.
The good produced by my system outweighs the risk. It will help the very farmers and soldiers that you wish to protect. By gathering all of the state debts into one and channeling them through a single national bank, the states can negotiate as a group and get better rates.
Those two visionaries, for a good purpose, good enlightened understanding, had one person who was going to decide which vision moved forward.
In what would become known as the Compromise of 1790, Hamilton was able to secure the necessary support for his economic policies. In return, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison would get their wish of relocating the American capital to Washington, D.C. Despite their history of political opposition, Hamilton played a crucial role in Thomas Jefferson's victory over Aaron Burr in the 1800 presidential election.
Alexander Hamilton really believed that Aaron Burr was not looking out for the best interests of the country. And he said that even though Aaron Burr and I have got along well personally, I don't believe that he has principle, I don't believe he has morals, I don't believe he's looking out for the United States. And so he threw his support to Thomas Jefferson.
Following another political defeat in 1804, a disgruntled Aaron Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel.
Most duels didn't end up in actual fighting or even on the dueling grounds. In fact, it was considered a demerit if you actually shot and killed the person.
While the actual events remain unclear to this day, Hamilton was mortally wounded by Aaron Burr's shot and died the following day.
Hamilton would say, I would love to design things for how I wish people were, but alas, I must design them for how I find them. That's what's special about Alexander Hamilton.
Diana, you had it work already.
Yes, sir. Just bringing over our brown butter for this recipe today.
This is Diana, my pastry chef in the City Tavern, and we are making a dessert in tribute of Alexander Hamilton. And what is that we're making?
Financier, which is very appropriate as his name is synonymous with finance. And it is a rich cake, it's expensive to make, and it's shaped like a gold bar.
And it's very delicious. It's my favorite dessert.
Of course. First thing we're gonna do is add some flour, powdered sugar, and almond meal together. Make sure they're fully incorporated. And this is almond meal, almond flour, or you could grind your own. Very few ingredients, as you can see. And now we're gonna move on to the eggs. Just gonna be working with the white. Gonna separate these out. Being careful not to break the yolk into the whites. So we're gonna add in 7 egg whites, just a little bit at a time so that we don't lose all of our dry mixture here to the whites. And slowly incorporate, and then once we get to the end, we'll whip it up a little bit. All right, and brown butter, just lightly toasted. You really don't wanna take it too far.
And how long we gotta bake that about?
This one bakes for 30 minutes or so at 325 degrees. And you'll know it's done because it looks like a gold bar. Perfectly golden brown, pulling away from the sides of the pan. And all of that sugar in there is really gonna make for a nice crunchy top to it. So what do you say? Shall we get it in the oven?
How long you say, Diana?
30 to 40 minutes.
In you go.
Okay, here we are with our finished financier. It's been out of the oven for about 20 minutes. It's nice and cool. And after baking, of course, for 30 to 40, we're just gonna put it on this lovely plate here and take a bite.
Can't wait, can't wait.
Oh yes, look at that beautiful gold color. Hamilton would be proud, I'm sure.
Looks beautiful.
And you can hear that lovely, lovely crust. Okay, let's split this one for you and me. Okay.
What I like about this particular cake is it's nice and dense. That's
It
what I like so much.
is.
And the flavor of the almond, so simple, but it's so elegant. The sugar, which almost caramelizes on top. Because of the marrying effect of all the egg white.
So rich and buttery, a real treat.
Diana, what a befitting dessert to this great meal I laid out for Alexander Hamilton. I want to thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Alexander Hamilton, for all you have done for America, for a taste of history.